All right, picture this for a second. You're walking through the hallowed halls of one of the world's most prestigious museums.
Okay.
Maybe it's the MoMA in New York, or I don't know, the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. You know the atmosphere I'm talking about, right? The ceilings are 30 feet high. There's that specific air conditioning hum.
Oh, yeah. And everyone is speaking in whispers.
Exactly. It creates this very specific kind of pressure, doesn't it? You feel like you're in a cathedral.
You do. And you're surrounded by these objects that are, essentially priceless.
Completely priceless. You're surrounded by canvases that cost more than the GDP of a small island nation. And you stop in front of one. Maybe it's the swirling, thick blues of a Van Gogh, or those chaotic, tangled drips of a Jackson Pollock. Maybe the brooding, deep voids of a Mark Rothko. You stand there, you marvel at it, you feel the weight of it, but then almost immediately, what's the backstory that your brain supplies?
That they were tortured.
Every single time. We call them geniuses in one breath and tortured souls in the next. It's this immediate, almost reflex association.
It is.
We tend to believe that to create profound work, an artist must be broken. That stability is, I don't know, boring, and that mental anguish is the actual fuel for the creative engine.
It's the man genius trope. It's arguably the most persistent myth in creative history.
Yeah.
We've romanticized the idea of the starving, suffering artist so deeply that we start to wonder if suffering is actually the secret ingredient.
Which brings us to today's deep dive. We're unpacking a really fascinating article from Anita Louise Art titled "The Myth of the Tortured Artist: Is Suffering the Secret Ingredient to Greatness?" And the mission today is pretty clear. We want to investigate whether suffering is actually a prerequisite for greatness, or if this whole tortured artist narrative is, well, a dangerous myth that does more harm than good.
And that's a critical distinction to make.
Yeah.
Because if we believe the myth, we're essentially saying that pain is necessary for beauty. We're telling young artists that they need to suffer to be valid.
Right.
But the reality and the history is so much more nuanced and, frankly, much more interesting.
So to really get this, we have to look at the giants who define the myth. The faces of the legend, so to speak. And there is one name that is basically the patron saint of the struggle. You know exactly who I'm going to say.
Vincent van Gogh. You absolutely cannot talk about this topic without talking about Vincent.
He is the ultimate template. I mean, the stats on his life are just, they're heartbreaking. We all know he sold only one painting in his lifetime, The Red Vineyard, while he was alive.
Just one. Think about that. Today, his works sell for hundreds of millions, but he lived in near poverty, relying entirely on his brother Theo.
And he suffered from these frequent psychotic episodes. Most people know the headline event, the fight with Gauguin, where he severed his own ear, and sadly, he died by suicide at the young age of 37.
It's a tragedy script. I mean, it hits every single beat of the doomed genius.
And here's what happens when we stand in front of the Starry Night. We look at that thick paint art, historians call it impasto, right? Where the paint is laid on so thickly you can see the brushstrokes.
Correct. Impasto. It adds texture and movement, almost making the paint look three-dimensional.
Right. So we see that aggressive texture, and we see the turbulence in the sky, and we project his biography right onto the canvas. We think, that's his mental illness. That is the madness manifesting in paint.
We assume the breakdown caused the breakthrough.
Exactly.
But that's a common perception. And here's the reality check, and this is a crucial nuance that the article from Anita Louise Art highlights. Vincent didn't paint because of his breakdown.
Wait, really? Because that's the story we're always told, that the madness fueled the vision.
It's actually the opposite. The evidence shows that when Vincent was in the grip of his psychosis, when he was actually mad, he couldn't work. He was incapacitated. He was terrified.
So the painting happened when?
He painted during the brief lucid windows between his episodes.
Wow. That is a massive distinction. So he wasn't diving into the madness to find inspiration.
No. For Vincent, art wasn't the storm. Art was the anchor. It was the thing keeping him from drifting away. He painted to stabilize himself.
So he was racing against the clock.
Exactly. Trying to capture the beauty of the world before the fog rolled back in.
That completely flips the narrative for me. It makes the paintings feel more urgent. It's not a celebration of illness. It's a desperate grab for sanity.
Precisely. And if we move forward in history to the mid-20th century, we see the same pattern and the same misunderstanding with Jackson Pollock.
The man of chaos, the drip paintings.
Pollock revolutionized the art world. I mean, he took the canvas off the easel, put it on the floor. He used a technique called action painting.
And for those who might not know the term, action painting is basically what it sounds like, right? It's not about carefully applying paint. It's about the physical act of dripping and splashing. The action is the art.
Exactly. It emphasizes the physical act of painting as an essential part of the finished work. But because the result looks so chaotic, these tangles of lines with no clear subject critics looked at Pollock's life and just drew a straight line.
Because Pollock's life was chaotic.
Incredibly so. He suffered from severe alcoholism and depression his entire adult life. So people looked at the splatter and thought, this is a map of his volatile mental state.
It fits the story perfectly. The chaotic mind creates chaotic art, and then his death.
Right.
Dying in a car accident while driving under the influence in 1956. It really cemented this idea that the fire fueling his art was the same fire that consumed him.
It's a tragic narrative, and it's a very seductive one. But again, look at the timeline. There are years where Pollock could barely pick up a brush because of his struggles.
So the alcohol didn't unlock his genius.
No, it often shut it down.
We tend to ignore the shutdown periods and focus only on the output. We do the same thing with Mark Rothko, who's the third giant in this tortured triumvirate.
Rothko's interesting because visually his work is the polar opposite of Pollock's.
Right, no drips, no chaos. It's color field painting. Can you define that for us quickly?
Sure. Color field painting is characterized by large, solid areas of single colors or fields spread across the canvas. The goal is usually to inspire contemplation.
So you stand in front of these massive, hovering blocks of color. But despite the stillness of the art, Rothko was a man of deep internal noise.
He was a man of deep intellect, but even deeper depression. He famously said he was interested in expressing basic human emotions, tragedy, ecstasy, doom.
Wow.
He felt the world didn't understand the spiritual depths of his work. He thought people just saw pretty colors that might match their sofa, while he was trying to communicate something profound.
The source material describes his paintings as visual size of a tired soul, which is just such a hauntingly beautiful description.
It is. And like Van Gogh, he eventually died by suicide. So you have these three giants, Van Gogh, Pollock, Rothko. Their lives provide the proof that the public uses to link mental anguish with brilliance.
Okay, so we have the proof, we have the tragic backstories, but I have to ask, why do we love this narrative so much? If suffering is so terrible, why do we, the audience, find it so seductive? Why do we want our heroes to be miserable?
That is the million-dollar question. The article breaks this down into a few psychological reasons, and, honestly, they reveal more about us than they do about the artists. The first is something called the price of genius theory.
The price of genius, what does that mean?
It's about cosmic balance. As humans, we have a tendency to want the world to be fair. So, if we see someone who has this extraordinary, almost godlike talent like Van Gogh, we feel a little better believing they had to pay for it with misery.
Oh, wow. So it's like, sure, you can paint the stars like that, but you have to be miserable. It makes us feel better about being normal.
Exactly. It creates an equilibrium. They have the genius, but we have the peace of mind. It's a defense mechanism against envy.
That is slightly dark, actually. It's like we need them to suffer to balance the scales.
It is dark, but it's human nature.
Okay.
Then there's the concept of authenticity through agony.
Let me guess. This is the idea that if you're happy, your art is fake.
In a way, yeah. We have a cultural bias that equates pain with truth. We assume that dark colors or jagged lines or tragic themes are a raw, unfiltered transmission of the soul. We think, this person really felt this, so it must be real.
Whereas if someone paints a nice bowl of fruit or a sunny garden, we're like, well, clearly they haven't seen the dark side of life. This is just decoration.
Right. We mistake trauma for depth. And finally, there's the romanticization of the outsider. Society has always had a complicated relationship with people who don't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
By framing the artist's struggle as torture, we turn their isolation into a heroic journey.
It turns a mental health crisis into a Greek tragedy. We aren't watching a sick person, we're watching a hero battle their demons.
Exactly. It makes the story epic rather than just sad. But here's where we need to pump the brakes. Because this myth, it's dangerous. And we have to ask the practical question, does suffering actually help create great art?
I feel like you're about to burst a lot of bubbles here, because the popular idea is that you need to be on the edge to see the view.
I am going to burst that bubble. Because the source is very clear on this. Debunking the myth of creativity through madness.
So logically, why doesn't madness help?
Think about what it actually takes to execute a masterpiece. It requires focus, discipline, cognitive energy. You need executive function to plan a composition, to mix colors accurately, to show up at the easel for 10 hours a day.
Right.
Suffering, whether it's depression or addiction, is exhausting. It consumes your battery.
That makes sense. It's hard to focus on a complex composition when you're just trying to survive the day.
Exactly. Look at Pollock again. We talk about his chaos fueling his art, but there were years where he could barely pick up a brush. He wasn't productive when he was at his worst.
So the masterpieces usually happen when?
During moments of stability, or when the art is used as a disciplined form of therapy to escape the torture. But the torture itself isn't the battery, it's the obstacle.
That brings up another side of this myth which drives me crazy, the starving artist.
Oh, the idea that you have to be poor to be real?
Yes. That if you're making money, you're a sellout. But if you're wondering where your next meal is coming from, your art is pure.
It's a total fallacy. Financial stress causes burnout, not breakthroughs. When you're worrying about rent, you're thinking about survival, not the sublime.
It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Hard to reach self-actualization when you don't have shelter or food.
Exactly. And the article points out some great counterexamples. Look at Peter Paul Rubens in the 17th century, or Andy Warhol in the 20th.
Warhol was definitely not starving. He called his studio the factory.
No, he was not. They were incredibly savvy business people. They used financial stability to fund their ambitious projects. Being broke didn't make them better artists. Being stable allowed them to buy better materials and take bigger risks.
Okay, so we've debunked the madness and we've debunked the poverty. But I want to see the light at the end of the tunnel. If we stop looking for tortured souls, who do we look at? Can we talk about the artists who were happy? Or at least functional?
Absolutely. And there are incredible examples of great art created without the agony.
Let's start with Claude Monet. I mean, the man painted water lilies. It doesn't get much more peaceful than that.
Monet is a perfect example. Now, he wasn't immune to life's hardships. He dealt with old age struggles, failing eyesight, the loss of his wife. But he didn't wallow in torture. He built a paradise for himself in Giverny.
He was a gardener.
He was a disciplined gardener and a family man. He produced thousands of works of joy and light. His stability allowed him to observe the world deeply and capture it beautifully.
Right. If he had been consumed by internal chaos, he never would have had the patience to sit and watch the light change on a haystack for 12 hours.
Never. And then there's Henri Matisse. He had a quote that critics used to hate, but I think it fits perfectly here.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Matisse had a wonderful philosophy. He believed art should be like a good armchair for the tired businessman.
A good armchair. That is the opposite of torture. It sounds almost too safe.
Some critics thought so. But think about the context. Matisse lived through world wars. He knew what suffering was. He believed the artist's job was to provide resilience and comfort.
And he was resilient himself.
Incredibly, even when he was bedridden later in life with cancer, he didn't stop creating. This is when he started doing the cutouts, right?
Yes. He couldn't stand at an easel anymore, so he took scissors and painted paper and created these vibrant, colorful shapes. He pinned them to the walls. He was creating life-affirming art despite his physical limitations.
He didn't need to be tortured to be profound. He needed to be resilient.
And we have a living legend mentioned in the source, too, David Hockney.
The guy with the bright glasses and the swimming pools.
Oh, the one.
Hockney is famously cheerful. He's driven by curiosity, not angst. He's in his 80s and still experimenting with iPads and new technology. He's been productive for decades because he enjoys the process of looking at the world.
So we have Monet, Matisse, Hockney, all proving that happiness and longevity can produce greatness.
Which brings us to the conclusion here. We need to change the narrative.
Now, to be clear, it's not about ignoring the pain of Van Gogh or Rothko, right? We're not saying their pain wasn't real or that we should just dismiss it.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Their struggles were very real, and they deserve our deepest empathy. But we must stop requiring that pain as a badge of validity. We shouldn't love Van Gogh because he suffered. We should love him because he persisted.
The article puts it perfectly. Van Gogh's secret language of color was a product of his genius, not his madness. His madness was the obstacle he had to hurdle.
That is the key shift. The modern view is moving toward valuing the health of the artist. A healthy artist can create for 70 years instead of 30.
Imagine what else Van Gogh could have painted if he had lived to be 70.
Exactly. We were robbed of decades of art because of his illness. That's not romantic, it's a tragedy. The source of art is resilience, curiosity, and discipline, not torture.
Right.
We love these artists because they are human. They felt loneliness and awe just like we do, but they had the skill to visualize it.
They left beauty behind despite the pain.
And that is what we should celebrate.
You know, this really changes how I'm going to look at those paintings next time I'm in a museum. Instead of seeing a testament to misery, I'm going to see a testament to strength.
And that is a much more powerful and much healthier way to view art.
So here's the final thought for you to mull over. Great art doesn't require a tortured soul. It only requires a soul willing to look at the world and say, I see this. Do you see it too?
Beautifully put.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, you are definitely going to want to check out the source material. We pulled this from an incredible article on Anita Louise art.
There is so much more there. And honestly, seeing the visuals alongside the stories makes a huge difference.
So here's your mission. Go subscribe to the Anita Louise Art YouTube channel for some great visual storytelling. Sign up for their free newsletter to join the community. It's a great way to get a dose of art in your inbox.
And don't forget the blog. It's a treasure trove for art education and inspiration.
Exactly. Go to Anita Louise Art, check out the blog, and tell them the deep dive sent you. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep looking at the world with fresh eyes.
See you next time.